The massive ship drifted through the dark space between stars. Its metal hull was black as the void around it, marked only by glowing symbols that pulsed with alien light. Inside the ship, tall figures moved through bright corridors. Their skin was pale blue and their eyes were large and dark. These were the Zephyrians, and they had been traveling through space for thousands of years. Commander. The Ixali stood before a wall of glowing screens in the ship's command center. His forearms moved quickly across the controls as data flowed past his eyes. For the past month, his scout ship had been mapping star systems in this part of the galaxy. It was routine work. Most star systems held nothing but empty rocks and gas. Sometimes they found life, but it was usually simple creatures that crawled in mud or swam in warm seas. But today was different. Today, they had found something interesting. The third planet from a yellow star showed signs of intelligent life. The creatures there had built cities and roads. They had machines that flew through their skies and boats that crossed their oceans. They even had primitive spacecraft that could reach their own moon. The Ixali touched a control and the main screen showed the planet. It was mostly blue water with brown and green land. White clouds swirled around it in patterns. The scanner data appeared beside the image, line after line of numbers and symbols. "What do we have here?" asked Sub-Commander Vrexen as she approached. Her voice had the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed, but there was excitement in it now. "A-Class. 7 Civilization," the Ixali replied. "They call their world Earth? They call themselves humans." Vrexen leaned closer to read the data. "Interesting. Population? 8 billion individuals spread across the planet's surface. They have divided themselves into many separate groups that they call nations. These nations often fight each other." "Primitive. Tribal behavior," Vrexen noted. "What about their technology?" The Ixali pulled up more screens. Images of human machines appeared. Cars moved along roads. Airplanes crossed skies. Ships sailed across oceans. They still burn fossil fuels for most of their energy. Their fastest spacecraft can barely reach 1% of light speed. They have nuclear weapons, but only the crude fission and fusion types. No energy shields, none detected. Gravity. Manipulation? No sign of it? Quantum technology? The Ixali shook his head. They appear to be just learning about quantum mechanics. Their computers still use electricity moving through metal wires. Vrexen made a sound that was like laughter. How wonderfully primitive. They would make excellent workers. The mining colonies always need more hands. This was how the Zephyrian hegemony had grown so large and powerful. They found worlds with intelligent life and took the people to work in their mines and factories. Some species fought back, but most surrendered quickly when they saw the power of Zephyrian weapons. After a few demonstrations of orbital bombardment, most primitives became very cooperative. "Send the data to Fleet Command," the Ixali ordered. "Request a harvest fleet." The message traveled through space faster than light, carried by quantum transmitters that humans could not even dream of building. It reached the Zephyrian home system in less than an hour. There, in the massive command stations that orbited their dying sun, military leaders reviewed the information about Earth. Admiral Kethvan was old even by Zephyrian standards. His pale blue skin had faded to almost white, and his large eyes had seen the conquest of 47 worlds. He read the report about humans while eating his morning meal. The food was grown in artificial gardens on captured worlds, tended by slaves from a dozen different species. "Another primitive world," he said to his aide. "Class 7 civilization, no real defenses. Standard harvest protocol should work. How large a fleet should we send?" the aide asked. Kethvan considered this. The humans had nuclear weapons, which meant they could damage ships that came too close to their planet. But Zephyrian shields could easily stop such crude explosives. Their energy weapons could destroy human cities from orbit without any risk. 12 harvest ships, he decided. 1 battle cruiser for support. That should be more than enough. It was actually quite generous. Most primitive worlds could be conquered with half that force. But humans had a large population spread across their entire planet. It would take time to round them all up. The aide made notes on his electronic tablet. When should the fleet depart? Tomorrow. No point in waiting. The sooner we harvest this world, the sooner we can put its people to work. Back in Earth's solar system, Commander Thexali continued his observations. The humans fascinated him in the way that insects might fascinate a biologist. They were so busy, always moving and building and fighting. Their radio transmissions filled space around their planet with a constant chatter of voices. Most species that the Zephyrians found were peaceful. They had learned to live in harmony with their worlds and each other. War was rare among truly advanced civilizations. But humans seemed to love conflict. Their history was one long story of battles and conquests. They had weapons designed specifically to kill other humans. They built vast armies and navies for the sole purpose of fighting their own kind. How strange, Rexon observed as she watched recordings of human military parades. Thousands of soldiers marched in perfect lines while huge war machines rolled past. They spend so much effort preparing to fight each other. Do they not realize that war is inefficient? Perhaps that is why they remain primitive, Thexali suggested. They waste their resources on conflict instead of advancement. What neither of them understood was that humans had become very, very good at war precisely because they practiced. It's so much. Every weapon they had ever built, every strategy they had ever developed, every lesson they had ever learned had come from fighting other humans. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing their own species. This made them uniquely dangerous, but the Zephyrians did not recognize the signs. The harvest fleet assembled quickly. 12 great ships, each one designed to hold thousands of prisoners, gathered in the empty space between stars. Their hulls were dark metal inscribed with the glowing symbols of the hegemony. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. The battlecruiser Dominion led the fleet. It was 3 kilometers long and bristled with energy weapons. Its shields could stop anything short of a star-going supernova. Admiral Kethvin himself commanded from its bridge, though he expected this to be a routine operation. All ships report ready, announced the fleet communication officer. Excellent, Kethvin replied. Set course for the human system, maximum speed. The ships disappeared in flashes of twisted space as their faster-than-light drives engaged. The journey to Earth would take 3 days. The Admiral planned to arrive, demand surrender, and begin loading human slaves onto the transport ships. Simple and efficient. He had no way of knowing that humanity had already detected his scout ship. Human radio telescopes had spotted the strange signals coming from beyond their solar system weeks ago. Military satellites had tracked an object moving in ways that no natural body could move. Deep space monitoring stations had recorded energy signatures that matched no known technology. The governments of Earth had held emergency meetings. Scientists had worked around the clock to analyze the data. Military leaders had begun moving forces into position. Humanity might be primitive by galactic standards, but they were not stupid. They knew that something was out there watching them. And they knew that it was not friendly. In secret facilities around the world, humans began preparing for war. They did not know what was coming, but they had learned one thing very well over their long and bloody history. When someone comes to your home uninvited, they usually mean you harm. The Zephyrian fleet raced through space toward Earth, confident in their superiority. They carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could stop starlight. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved millions of beings, but they had never fought humans before. They had never fought a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to kill. They had never faced beings who saw war not as a failure of diplomacy, but as just another tool to be mastered. They had never encountered creatures who would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Zephyrians thought they were coming to harvest easy prey. They were about to learn how. Wrong, they could be in 3 days. The sky above Earth would burn. The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Earth's moon. 12 massive harvest ships and the battlecruiser Dominion appeared in flashes of blue light against the black of space. Their arrival sent ripples through the solar system that every human detection device immediately picked up. Admiral Kethvan stood on the bridge of the Dominion and looked at the blue and white planet hanging in the void before him. It looked so peaceful from this distance. The swirling clouds and vast oceans reminded him of his own homeworld before the wars had poisoned its skies. "Begin standard contact protocol," he ordered. The communication officer activated the translation systems and opened a channel to Earth. The message would be broadcast on every frequency that humans used for their primitive radio systems. "Attention. Inhabitants of the third planet," Admiral Kethvan's voice boomed across Earth's airwaves. "I am Admiral Kethvan of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare your population for relocation. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your cities." The bridge crew waited for the expected response. Usually, primitive species panicked when they first heard alien voices. Their governments would argue among themselves for a few hours, then send desperate messages begging for mercy. Sometimes they offered tribute or tried to negotiate. It was always the same pattern, but this time, something was different. Instead of chaotic radio chatter, Earth's communications went almost silent for several minutes. Then, a single transmission came back on a military frequency. The voice was calm and clear, speaking in the language the Zephyrians had identified as English. "This is General Sarah Martinez, speaking for the Terran Defense Initiative. We have received your message. Our response is simple. Come and take it." Admiral Kethvan blinked his large dark eyes in surprise. Sub-Commander Vrexon looked up from her console with confusion on her blue face. "Did they just refuse to surrender?" she asked. "It appears so," the Admiral replied. "How unusual. Most primitives at least try to negotiate." "Perhaps they do not understand our capabilities," suggested the tactical officer. "Should we provide a demonstration?" Admiral Kethvan nodded. This was standard procedure when dealing with stubborn primitives. A show of force usually brought them to their senses quickly. "Target the largest population center on their primary continent," he ordered. "Low power setting? We want to damage their infrastructure, not destroy valuable workers." The tactical officer's hands moved across his controls. The Dominion's main energy cannon began to charge with a high-pitched whine that echoed through the ship's corridors. On the targeting screen, a massive city appeared. The human designation was New Tokyo, and it held over 30 million people. "Firing," announced the tactical officer. A beam of coherent energy lanced down from the battlecruiser toward Earth. It was a precise strike, carefully calculated to destroy several city blocks and demonstrate Zephyrian power without causing excessive casualties. The beam struck the city's center and— "Sir, the beam is being deflected," reported the tactical officer. His voice filled with disbelief. On the main screen, they could see a shimmering dome of energy surrounding the entire city. The Zephyrian energy beam struck the shield and scattered into harmless light that danced across the barrier like aurora. "Impossible," whispered Vrexon. "Our scans showed no defensive technology." Admiral Kethvan stared at the screen. In 47 previous conquests, he had never seen primitive shields capable of stopping Zephyrian weapons. "Increase power to 50%, he commanded. The second beam was much stronger. It struck the shield around New Tokyo, and this time, cracks appeared in the energy barrier. The shield flickered and failed, and the beam punched through to strike the city below. But instead of the expected devastation, something extraordinary happened. The moment the shield fell, every human in the city began moving with practiced precision. Transportation systems that had been hidden underground suddenly activated. Millions of people flowed into subway tunnels, underground highways, and concealed shelters that the Zephyrian scans had somehow missed. At the same time, the city's skyline began to change. Buildings that had looked like ordinary offices and apartment complexes suddenly revealed their true nature. Walls slid away to expose missile batteries. Rooftops opened to reveal defensive cannons. What had appeared to be a civilian population center was actually a fortress. "General quarters!" Admiral Kethvin shouted. "All ships raise shields." His order came just in time. The first wave of human missiles launched from sites across Earth's surface. They were crewed by Zephyrian standards using chemical rockets and nuclear warheads. But there were thousands of them, rising from every continent like angry hornets. The Zephyrian ship's energy shields easily stopped the nuclear explosions. But as the smoke cleared, more missiles were already in the air. And these were different. Somehow, the humans had modified their weapons in the few minutes since the first attack. The new missiles carried electromagnetic pulse warheads that made the Zephyrian shields flicker and spark. "How are they adapting so quickly?" Rexon demanded. Admiral Kethvin had no answer. Every other species they had conquered took months or years to develop new weapons. Humans had done it in minutes. The attack was just beginning. From hidden bases on Earth's moon, more missiles launched. These carried kinetic warheads that struck the Zephyrian ships like hammers. The shields held, but the impact sent vibrations through the hulls that rattled equipment and threw crew members to the floor. Then came the ships. Human spacecraft began lifting off from Earth in numbers that defied the intelligence reports. The Zephyrians had detected maybe 50 human vessels in the entire solar system. But now, hundreds were rising from the planet's surface, then thousands. "Where did they all come from?" asked the communication officer. The answer became clear as the human fleet approached. Many of the ships were obviously civilian vessels that had been hastily converted to military use. Cargo haulers carried missile pods welded to their hulls. Passenger liners had been fitted with armor plating and cannons. Even small personal spacecraft had been modified to carry weapons, but most disturbing of all were the ships that were clearly purpose-built for war. Sleek fighters that moved with deadly grace. Massive battleships bristling with weapons. Carriers that launched swarms of smaller attack craft. The humans had been building a war fleet in secret, hiding it from Zephyrian sensors. "This is not possible," Admiral Kethvin muttered. "Our intelligence was perfect. We monitored their communications for months." What he did not understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment for decades. Ever since they had first detected radio signals from space that did not come from any known source, human governments had been working together in secret. They had built hidden shipyards. They had developed new technologies. They had created a global defense network that could function even if their governments were destroyed. Most importantly, they had learned to hide their preparations from anyone who might be watching. The first wave of human fighters reached the Zephyrian fleet and opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Particle beams that cut through armor. Missiles that could track targets faster than the eye could follow. Energy shields that flickered around the human ships like protective shells. "They have our technology," Rexon said in shock. "How do they have our technology?" The answer came as Admiral Kethvin reviewed the tactical displays. 3 months ago, the Zephyrian scout ship had been detected by human sensors. Instead of hiding, humanity had done something unprecedented. They had captured the scout ship. They had taken its crew prisoner. And they had reverse-engineered every piece of technology they could find. In 3 months, humanity had learned to build energy shields, particle beam weapons, and faster-than-light communications equipment. They had taken Zephyrian technology and adapted it to human manufacturing techniques. The result was crude but effective weapons that could hurt. Even advanced alien warships. The human attack was unlike anything Admiral Kethvin had ever experienced. There was no formation flying, no careful tactics, no attempt to minimize casualties. The humans attacked like a swarm of predators, each ship acting independently but somehow coordinating with all the others. When human ships were damaged, they did not retreat. Instead, they accelerated toward the nearest Zephyrian vessel and exploded their own reactors, turning themselves into massive bombs. When human fighters ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as missiles, ramming into Zephyrian hulls at tremendous speeds. "They are insane," whispered the tactical officer as he watched another human ship sacrifice itself to destroy a Zephyrian harvester. But Admiral Kethvin was beginning to understand. These humans were not insane. They were doing exactly what any cornered predator would do. They were fighting with everything they had because they knew that surrender meant slavery or death. The battle raged for hours. Zephyrian ships fell one by one, their hulls broken by human weapons or torn apart by suicide attacks. The humans paid a terrible price for each victory, losing dozens of ships for every Zephyrian vessel they destroyed. But they kept coming. By the end of the day, half of Admiral Kethvin's fleet was gone. The reinforcements arrived 2 weeks later. Admiral Kethvin watched from the bridge of his damaged battlecruiser as 3 full battle fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 90 warships appeared in formation, their hulls gleaming, with fresh armor and their weapons fully charged. It was the largest force the Zephyrian hegemony had assembled in over a century. Fleet Admiral Zefter commanded the reinforcements from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory. The ship was 5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. When his image appeared on Kethvin's communication screen, his expression was cold with anger. "Explain to me how you lost 6 ships to primitives," Zefter demanded. Admiral Kethvin looked older than his years. The past 2 weeks had been a nightmare of constant human attacks. Small groups of human fighters would appear without warning, strike at his damaged ships, then disappear before the Zephyrians could respond. The humans seem to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "They are not what we expected," Kethvin replied. "They fight like nothing we have encountered before. They have no fear of death. They use tactics that make no sense, and they learn faster than any species we have ever seen." Fleet Admiral Zefter made a dismissive gesture. "You faced a few thousand primitive spacecraft with outdated equipment. I have brought 90 of our most advanced warships. We will crush this human resistance in a matter of hours." But even as he spoke, the human attacks began again. Small groups of fighters emerged from behind Earth's moon, launching missiles at the new Zephyrian fleet. These were not the crude weapons the humans had used 2 weeks ago. These missiles moved faster, hit harder, and seemed to know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. "Impossible," whispered Zefter as he watched his shields flicker under the impact. How did they improve their weapons so quickly? The answer lay on Earth's surface, in hidden factories that had been working non-stop since the first battle. Human engineers had studied every piece of wreckage from the destroyed Zephyrian ships. They had analyzed the energy signatures of alien weapons. They had reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology and combined it with human manufacturing techniques. The result was a new generation of weapons that were both alien and human. They used Zephyrian energy principles but were built with human materials. They incorporated alien targeting systems but were controlled by human artificial intelligence. Most importantly, they were designed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The human fighters that attacked the new Zephyrian fleet were different too. Instead of converted civilian ships, these were purpose-built war machines. They moved with deadly precision, their pilots trained in combat techniques that no alien had ever imagined. When one fighter was destroyed, 3 more appeared to take its place. "Where are they coming from?" demanded Zefter as wave after wave of human ships attacked his fleet. The tactical officer studied his screens. "They appear to be launching from multiple points around the planet. Underground facilities, hidden moon bases, asteroid mining stations that have been converted to military use. Sir, I am detecting launch signatures from locations we did not know existed." What the Zephyrians still did not understand was that humanity had been preparing for interstellar war for much longer than they realized. The secret had not begun with the capture of the scout ship. It had started decades earlier when human scientists first detected artificial radio signals from deep space. Every major nation on Earth had contributed to the defense project. Russian engineers had built underground factories in Siberia. American scientists had established hidden research stations in Antarctica. Chinese manufacturers had converted entire cities to weapons production. European space agencies had secretly constructed military bases throughout the solar system. But the most terrifying aspect of human preparation was not their technology or their numbers. It was their mindset. Humans had approached the possibility of alien invasion the same way they approached any other threat. They had studied it, planned for it, and prepared to win at any cost. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. Human tactics made no sense by traditional standards. They did not form orderly battle lines or follow predictable attack patterns. Instead, they swarmed like insects, striking from every direction at once. Human ships would appear from behind. Asteroids fire their weapons, then disappear into clouds of debris. Others would hide in the shadows of larger vessels, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Some would pretend to be destroyed, drifting powerless until Zephyrian ships came close, then explode in massive nuclear fireballs. "They are using kamikaze tactics," reported the tactical officer. "Deliberate suicide attacks designed to take our ships with them." Fleet Admiral Zefter had read about such tactics in historical documents, but he had never seen them used in real combat. Most civilized species considered suicide attacks to be wasteful and barbaric. But humans seemed to view their own lives as just another weapon to be used against the enemy. What made it worse was that the humans were not dying senselessly. Each suicide attack was carefully planned to cause maximum damage. Human pilots would ram their ships into critical points on Zephyrian vessels, weapons arrays, shield generators, engine systems. A single human fighter, sacrificing itself at the right moment, could disable a ship 100 times its size. The ground war was even more confusing. Zephyrian landing forces that managed to reach Earth's surface found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any rules. Human soldiers would retreat from one position only to attack from another. They would surrender, then detonate hidden explosives when their captors came close. They turned their own cities into death traps, using every building and street as a weapon. Most disturbing of all was how quickly humans adapted to alien technology. Zephyrian energy weapons that fell into human hands were quickly reverse-engineered and mass-produced. Alien armor was studied and copied. Even damaged Zephyrian vehicles were repaired and turned against their former owners. Commander Vrexen, who had survived the first battle aboard Kethvan ship, found herself leading a ground assault on what human maps called New York City. The mission should have been simple: capture the population center and establish a staging area for further operations. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare of urban warfare. Human resistance fighters seemed to know every tunnel, every building, every hiding place in the massive city. They would attack from sewers, from rooftops, from underground passages that did not appear on any map. "How many humans are there?" asked one of her soldiers as they took cover behind an overturned vehicle. Energy beams from human weapons sparked off the metal around them. Vrexen checked her scanner. According to the device, there were no human life signs within a kilometer of their position, but she could hear weapons fire coming from every direction. Somehow, the humans had learned to hide from Zephyrian sensors. "They are using their own infrastructure against us," she realized. Their communication networks, their transportation systems, their power grids. Everything we thought was civilian technology is actually part of their military system. This was the most frightening discovery of all. Human civilization was not divided between military and civilian sectors the way Zephyrian society was. Every human factory could be converted to weapons production. Every civilian vehicle could become a military transport. Every communication network could coordinate resistance activities. The humans had not just prepared for war. They had structured their entire civilization to fight a war. As the weeks passed, Fleet Admiral Zefter watched his overwhelming force slowly torn apart by human tactics. His ships were faster and more powerful than anything humanity could build. His weapons were more advanced. His shields were stronger. But none of that mattered when the enemy refused to fight a traditional battle. Humans would attack his supply lines, forcing him to divert ships to protect cargo vessels. They would strike at isolated outposts, drawing his forces away from their main objectives. They would use captured Zephyrian equipment to send false communications, leading entire squadrons into carefully prepared ambush. Worst of all, they were learning from every encounter. Human tactics evolved daily, becoming more sophisticated and more deadly. Weapons that worked against them one day would be useless the next as humanity developed countermeasures. "We need more ships," Zephyr finally admitted to the Hegemony Council in a desperate transmission. "These humans are not a primitive species. They are a military civilization. Every one of them is a soldier. Their entire planet is a fortress." The response from the Hegemony was cold and calculating. Resources were limited. Other sectors required protection. The war with humanity was costing more than the conquest of 40 previous worlds combined, but there was something else in the Council's message that chilled Zephyr to his core. Reports were coming in from other sectors of space. Zephyrian colonies were under attack by ships that used human tactics and human weapons. Somehow, humanity had learned to build faster-than-light vessels. They were taking the war beyond Earth's solar system. The hunters had become the hunted. The Zephyrians, who had spent centuries conquering other species, now found themselves fighting. Dr. Sarah Chun had not slept for 3 days. Her eyes were red with exhaustion as she stared at the alien device on her laboratory table. Around her, dozens of human scientists worked frantically to understand the technology they had captured. From destroyed Zephyrian ships, the device was smaller than a human hand but infinitely complex. Crystalline circuits pulsed with energy patterns that seemed to bend the laws of physics. This was a Zephyrian faster-than-light communication system? And Sarah was determined to crack its secrets. "Any progress?" asked General Martinez as she entered the underground laboratory. The facility was hidden 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, one of hundreds of secret research stations that humanity had built in preparation for interstellar war. Sarah looked up from her microscope. "We are close. The quantum encryption is unlike anything in our theoretical models, but I think we understand the basic principles. Give me 6 more hours." "You have 3, Martinez replied. "The Zephyrian fleet is preparing for another major assault. We need every advantage we can get." Sarah nodded and returned to her work. Around the world, similar scenes were playing out in hidden laboratories. Human scientists were dissecting alien technology with the desperate intensity of a species fighting for survival. Every captured weapon, every piece of wreckage, every fragment of alien equipment was studied, analyzed, and reverse-engineered. This was humanity's greatest strength, though the Zephyrians did not yet realize it. Humans were natural engineers and innovators. They had built their entire civilization by taking existing ideas and making them better. Now, they were applying that same talent to alien technology. In orbit above Earth, Captain James Fletcher commanded the human battleship Defiance. The ship had been built in secret over the past 6 months, using a combination of human engineering and captured Zephyrian technology. Its armor was human steel reinforced with alien alloys. Its weapons combined human targeting systems with Zephyrian energy projectors. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his sensor officer. "Zephyrian heavy cruiser moving to intercept our supply convoy." Fletcher studied the tactical display. The convoy carried critical supplies to human forces fighting on Mars. If it was destroyed, the entire operation in the outer solar system would collapse. "All ships, attack formation Delta," Fletcher commanded. "Remember, we are not trying to win a fair fight. We are trying to kill that ship." The human fleet that responded to Fletcher's call was a strange collection of vessels. Military ships fought alongside converted cargo haulers and modified passenger liners. Some were sleek and modern, built specifically for war. Others were decades old, their hulls patched and repatched, kept flying by determination and spare parts, but they all had one thing in common: they were crewed by humans who understood that defeat meant slavery or death. The battle was swift and brutal. The Zephyrian cruiser was more advanced than any human ship, but it was alone and outnumbered. Human vessels swarmed around it like angry wasps, striking from every angle. When The alien ship raised its shields. Human missiles found weak points in the energy barrier. When it returned fire, human ships scattered and regrouped, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. The end came when a damaged human destroyer, its hull split and its engines failing, rammed directly into the Zephyrian ship's main reactor. The explosion lit up space for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. "Target destroyed," reported Fletcher's tactical officer. Human casualties, 1 destroyer and 37 fighters. Zephyrian casualties, 1 heavy cruiser and all hands. It was a typical exchange. Humans lost more ships and more lives, but they could replace their losses faster than the Zephyrians could. Human shipyards worked around the clock, building new vessels with assembly line efficiency. Human training centers produced new pilots and crew members in weeks rather than years. Most importantly, every human death made the survivors fight harder. This was something the Zephyrians could not understand. In their culture, heavy losses were a reason to retreat and reconsider strategy. For humans, heavy losses were a reason to attack with even greater fury. Back in her laboratory, Dr. Chang finally achieved her breakthrough. The alien communication device suddenly came to life, its crystalline circuits glowing with captured energy. Streams of data began flowing across her computer screens as the device automatically connected to the Zephyrian military network. "My God," Sarah whispered as she read the intercepted messages. "General Martinez needs to see this immediately." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood before a room full of military leaders and government officials. On the wall behind her, a massive screen displayed translated Zephyrian communications. The messages painted a picture that was both encouraging and terrifying. "The good news is that we are winning," Sarah began. "Zephyrian losses are much higher than we estimated. Their fleets are being pulled back from other sectors to deal with us. Some of their colonies are reporting supply shortages because of our attacks on their shipping." General Martinez leaned forward. "And the bad news?" Sarah touched a control, and new data appeared on the screen. "The Zephyrians are not just conquerors. They are a dying species. Their homeworld is environmentally destroyed. Their population is declining. They need our planet and our people to survive as a species." "Which means they will never stop fighting," said Admiral Thompson, commander of the human space forces. "Worse than that," Sarah continued. "According to these communications, they are preparing to use their most destructive weapons, planet killers they would rather destroy Earth completely than let us remain free." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had been fighting for freedom. The Zephyrians were fighting for survival. It was a war that could only end with the complete destruction of one species or the other. "There is more," Sarah said, bringing up another set of data. "We now have access to their entire military communication network. We know the locations of their fleets, their supply bases, their colonies. We know which worlds they have conquered and which ones they are planning to attack next." General Martinez studied the star map that appeared on the screen. Dozens of systems were marked with Zephyrian symbols. Some were military bases. Others were slave colonies where conquered species worked in mines and factories. A few were marked as homeworlds of species that the Zephyrians had completely enslaved. "We cannot just defend Earth anymore," Martinez said quietly. "If we want to survive, we have to destroy them completely." "That will mean attacking their homeworld," Admiral Thompson pointed out. "It will mean fighting across dozens of star systems. It will mean a war that could last decades." "Then that is what we will do," Martinez replied. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We have always survived by fighting back harder than our enemies expected." The decision was made in that underground room, though it would not be announced to the public for months. Humanity would not simply defend Earth. They would take the war to the Zephyrians. They would free the enslaved species. They would hunt down every Zephyrian fleet and base and colony, until none remained. It was an ambitious plan that would require resources and determination beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. But as Sarah looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders, She saw the same expression on every face. It was the look of predators who had scented prey. Within hours, new orders went out to human forces throughout the solar system. The defensive phase of the war was over. Now came the attack. Human fleets that had been protecting Earth and Mars began moving toward the edge of the solar system. Hidden shipyards increased production to maximum capacity. Training centers began preparing pilots for interstellar combat. Most importantly, human engineers began modifying their ships for long-range operations. The vessels that had been designed to fight in Earth's solar system were rebuilt for warfare. Across the galaxy, they received better life support systems, improved faster-than-light drives, and larger fuel tanks. But the most significant modification was psychological. Human ships were equipped with devices that would broadcast a simple message to any Zephyrian forces they encountered. The message was in the Zephyrian language, translated by captured communication equipment. This is the human species. You came to our world seeking slaves, you found predators. Surrender now, or we will hunt you across the galaxy until none of your kind remain. The message was not a bluff. Humanity had made its decision. The Zephyrians had started this war by trying to enslave Earth. Humanity would end it by destroying every Zephyrian military asset in the galaxy. As the first human interstellar fleets prepared to leave the solar system, Dr. Chun continued her work in the hidden laboratory. She had unlocked the secrets of Zephyrian communication technology, but there were still dozens of other alien devices to analyze. Each one might contain the key to some new capability that humanity could use in the coming war. She thought about the intercepted messages she had translated. The Zephyrians called humans the prey species that became predators. They were warning their colonies to prepare for attacks by the species from the yellow star system. Sarah smiled grimly as she returned to her work. The Zephyrians were right to be afraid. They had awakened something that had been sleeping. The human fleet that arrived at Zephyr Prime was nothing like the primitive spacecraft that had defended Earth 2 years earlier. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with captured alien technology fused to human engineering. At their head flew the dreadnought Retribution, a massive vessel built from the wreckage of a dozen Zephyrian ships. Admiral Sarah Martinez stood on the bridge of the Retribution and looked at the blue-green world hanging in space before her. Zephyr Prime was beautiful, with swirling white clouds and vast oceans that reminded her of Earth, but she felt no sympathy for the planet below. This was the homeworld of the species that had tried to enslave humanity. "All ships report ready for operation," announced her communications officer. Martinez nodded. "Begin the broadcast." Across every frequency that the Zephyrians used, a message began playing in their own language. It was simple and direct. "This is Admiral Martinez of the human species. You came to our world seeking slaves. You found something else. Surrender now or watch your sky burn." On the surface of Zephyr Prime, emergency sirens wailed in every city. Zephyrian civilians looked up at their sky in terror as human ships blotted out their sun. Many had never seen an alien vessel before. Their military had always fought its wars in distant systems, keeping the violence far from their peaceful homeworld. But now the war had come to them. Fleet. Admiral Zephyr commanded the last great Zephyrian fleet from the orbital defense station above his homeworld. 200 ships remained under his command, the survivors of dozens of battles across the galaxy. They were battle-tested veterans, the best crews and the finest ships his species could produce. It would not be enough. "Launch all fighters," Zephyr ordered. "Deploy the planetary shield. Activate all orbital weapons platforms." The space around Zephyr Prime erupted into activity. Hundreds of Zephyrian fighters poured from their carrier ships. Massive energy shields flickered to life around the planet. Weapon platforms that had guarded the homeworld for centuries powered up their guns. The human response was swift and terrifying. Instead of attacking the shields directly, the human fleet began moving in patterns that made no sense to Zephyrian tactics. They scattered across the system, some ships diving toward the planet while others accelerated away from it. "What are they doing?" asked Zephyros' tactical officer. "They are not maintaining formation. They are not concentrating their firepower." Admiral Martinez smiled grimly as she watched the Zephyrian confusion. Humans had learned much from 2 years of constant warfare. They had studied every Zephyrian battle tactic, every defensive strategy, every military doctrine. Now they were using that knowledge against their enemies. "Execute Plan Icarus," Martinez commanded. 20 human ships suddenly changed course and accelerated directly toward Zephyr Prime's sun. The Zephyrians watched in confusion as the vessels plunged toward the massive star. It looked like a suicide run, but there were no targets near the sun worth attacking. The truth became clear when the human ships reached the star's corona. Instead of being destroyed by the intense heat and radiation, they deployed massive collector arrays. Within minutes, they were harvesting the star's energy and redirecting it through focusing mirrors toward the planet. "Impossible," whispered Zephyr. "No ship can survive that close to a star." But human ships could, because human engineers had built them specifically for this purpose. They had studied Zephyrian defensive strategies and realized that every planet was protected by shields that could stop conventional weapons. So they had built something unconventional, ships that could turn a star itself into a weapon. The focused starlight struck Zephyr Prime's planetary shield like a hammer made of pure energy. The shield held for several seconds, then began to flicker and fail under the impossible strain. No defense system had ever been designed to stop the concentrated power of an entire star dot as the planetary shield collapsed. The rest of the human fleet attacked. But this was not the chaotic swarm tactics they had used at Earth. This was something new and far more terrifying. Precision warfare conducted by a species that had spent 2 years learning to kill efficiently. Human fighters moved through the Zephyrian defenses like sharks through a school of fish. Their pilots had been trained in combat techniques developed from analyzing thousands of hours of battle recordings. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Human capital ships targeted critical infrastructure with surgical precision. Communications satellites, power stations, military command centers, all were destroyed. In the opening minutes of the battle, the humans were not trying to conquer Zephyr Prime. They were trying to cripple it completely, but the most terrifying weapons in the human arsenal were not their ships or their energy collectors. They were their soldiers. When human landing craft reached the planet's surface, they deployed troops that fought like nothing the Zephyrians had ever encountered. These were not the desperate defenders who had fought on Earth. These were professional soldiers who had spent 2 years fighting across the galaxy. They had liberated a dozen enslaved worlds. They had destroyed Zephyrian fleets and bases and colonies. They had learned to wage war with cold, calculating efficiency. Commander Vrexon, one of the few Zephyrian officers to survive the battles at Earth, led the defense of the capital city. She had thought she understood human tactics, but what she saw now was completely different from the chaotic resistance she had faced before. Human soldiers moved through her city like a plague. They used advanced equipment to map every building, every tunnel, every hiding place. They deployed drones that could fit through air vents and monitor entire districts. They used captured Zephyrian technology combined with human artificial intelligence to predict where defenders would position themselves. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to know exactly what they were looking for. While Zephyrian forces tried to stop their advance, human teams bypassed the fighting entirely and struck directly at government buildings, military headquarters, and scientific research facilities. "They are not trying to control the city," Vrexon realized as she watched the tactical displays. "They are trying to download our entire civilization." She was right. Human cyber warfare specialists were breaking into every Zephyrian computer system they could find. They were copying scientific databases, military records, cultural archives, and technical specifications. In a matter of hours, humanity was stealing thousands of years of Zephyrian knowledge and technology, but they were not just taking information. They were also planting something in return. Computer viruses designed by human programmers began spreading through Zephyrian networks. These were not simple destructive programs. They were sophisticated digital weapons that would slowly corrupt Zephyrian data, making their own technology unreliable. In orbit, the space battle was reaching its conclusion. Zephyrian ships fell one by one, overwhelmed by human tactics they could not counter. The humans had learned to use the environment itself as a weapon. They drove Zephyrian vessels into asteroid fields, then detonated hidden mines. They used gravitational slingshots to accelerate their own ships to impossible speeds. They even turned space debris into kinetic weapons by manipulating it with tractor beams. Fleet. Admiral Zephyr watched his fleet die with the resignation of a commander who had finally understood his enemy. The humans were not just better fighters. They were better at war itself. They had taken the art of destruction and turned it into a science. "Send a message to all remaining Zephyrian colonies," he ordered as his flagship's hull began to buckle under human fire. "Tell them to avoid the yellow star system. Tell them to avoid the species that calls itself human. Tell them we thought they were prey, but they are the greatest predators the galaxy has ever seen." The message was transmitted just before the flagship's reactor exploded, taking Zephyr and his crew with it. As the last Zephyrian resistance collapsed, Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched Zephyr Prime's sky burn. The focused starlight had ignited the planet's upper atmosphere, creating aurora displays that could be seen from space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "Admiral, we are receiving surrender signals from the remaining Zephyrian forces," reported her communications officer. Martinez considered this for a moment. The logical thing would be to accept the surrender and establish a human occupation government. But humanity had learned something important during their war with the Zephyrians. Mercy could be a luxury that prey species could not afford. "Send a response," Martinez ordered. "Any Zephyrian military personnel who lay down their arms will be allowed to leave this system in unarmed transports. They have 72 hours to evacuate. After that, any Zephyrian vessel in this system will be destroyed." It was not mercy. It was practical strategy. The surviving Zephyrians would spread word of humanity's victory throughout the galaxy. Other species would learn that the humans from the yellow star system were not to be threatened. 3 days later, the last Zephyrian transport ship limped away from their former homeworld. Behind them, human engineers were already beginning the transformation of Zephyr Prime into a forward military base. The planet's cities would be rebuilt as human settlements. Its factories,